Hello, welcome back to the Your Everyday Strength podcast. My name is Josh Sternberg, and if you are just joining me for the very first time, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. If you are coming back, if you've listened to a few episodes before this, thank you very, very much. This is, or should be, episode 7. I'm not going to lie, might be a little bit out of order from when I record them to when I put them out, but idealistically, this is going to be episode 7. And similar to the one around a couple of weeks ago on spirituality, today's episode is actually going to be more of a bit of a personal, introspective, reflective episode. Now, this actual episode is going to be based around relationships, both personal, you know, business, all of those sort of things. So, essentially discussing relationships, boundaries, etc., and what it kind of has looked like for me in the essence of both my life and more or less a little bit more specifically over the last 9 months or so, since I've really started to dive a little bit deeper onto this sort of stuff. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I'm not here to preach, right? This is not me telling you how you should live your life. This is not me giving you a framework that's backed by science to do these things. This is quite literally my own personal experiences, the things that I have gone and learned about or read or listened to or sat with and dived deeper on. And it's more or less about what I've learned and unlearned about myself through relationships in general. This is generally a topic that I would probably say you wouldn't necessarily expect from a male strength coach. Now, the spirituality episode was probably an episode where you would not expect it from a male strength coach, at least in 2025. But I've found that when I have had conversations with people around these topics and when I have had discussions or put things on social media or anything like that, I've actually opened the door to some absolutely fucking amazing conversations that have really changed my perspective about the way I kind of show up and the way in which I put things out into the world. Now, this stuff can be very daunting. I won't lie. I was fucking nervous coming into this. I procrastinated for about 15 to 20 minutes before hitting record because it's something that it's very vulnerable. Like, it is a very vulnerable conversation to have, especially as a male, especially as a male strength coach in this industry, right? Like, it's something that can be seen not necessarily different, but I think there's a lot of value. I know there's a lot of value in it. And this topic really matters from a perspective of personal development, self-leadership, you know, athletic business performance, etc. The way in which we handle relationships, the way in which we deal with our own personal relationship within ourselves, and the way in which we deal with our relationships with others. No matter who you are, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what you're doing, all of this stuff can benefit you. All of this stuff can help. So I'm going to kick straight off, right? I've spoken about it a couple of times. I've mentioned it briefly. I've touched on, I've not necessarily ever dove deep, and I'm probably not going to dive too deep into it today. But a lot of the journey that I'm currently on now was sparked by the end of a relationship that happened at the back end of last year around September. Now, I had split with my partner at that time, and this this breakup or breakdown of a relationship was just something that was so different to anything I'd experienced before. And it was something that pushed me to discover myself, pushed me to discover deeper, pushed me to discover a little bit more about myself, who I am, why I am the way I am. Get me to work on things that I know I probably should have been working on for a while, but I'd maybe sort of been avoiding them, or I hadn't necessarily wanted to touch on them, or I hadn't really even sat with it and been like, this is something I can identify that I need to fix. Now, this relationship, I can probably say, changed me more than any other relationship I've ever had in my life. There was a lot of what I guess you could say, quote unquote, negative aspects. However, every single one of the negative things that have occurred or happened throughout that relationship or after that relationship or whatever the case might be have actually been fucking incredibly positive, because without the things that had occurred through that relationship, I never would have dove as deep as I have into the things that I have now to sort of discover myself a little bit more, and to actually be able to sit with some of this stuff and to actively work on these things and identify, like, am I showing up as the person I want to show up as in this world? Am I showing up within my business? Am I showing up within my personal relationships? Am I doing all of the things that I know I should be doing, but I'm sort of avoiding them? And quite frankly, the answer to pretty much every single one of those questions was no. I was not the person I wanted to be. I was not showing up as the person I wanted to be. To the back end of the relationship, I remember having that discussion multiple times and saying, I'm becoming somebody I don't want to become. I'm turning into a person I don't want to be long term. And that scares the fuck out of me. And it took that to really me sort of having to admit that to not only this person, but myself, to actually be able to sit there and be like, fuck, okay, well, something needs to change, right? Like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So it's not enough for me to sit around and identify and say, hey, I am turning into somebody I don't want to be. I need to then actively go and work on becoming the person I do want to be. And I need to actively work on fixing the things I need to fix to ensure that I can show up better as the person I want to be for the future. Now, I cannot lie, in any way, shape, or form, I was no saint within the relationship. As I said, I was showing up as a person I didn't want to become. Throughout the relationship, I'd started to become quite angry. I'd started to become quite reactive. I'd started to become quite dismissive. I'd started to just almost pull into a shell of a person that I didn't want to become. And I was just not finding joy, fulfillment in any areas of my life. Now it was starting to take an effect. And this is why I say that it has an effect on all aspects of your life. It not only was affecting my relationship, it was affecting my work, it was affecting my training, it was affecting all of these different avenues where I kind of knew I wasn't necessarily showing up as the person I wanted to become, but I just wasn't doing anything about it. Navigating this relationship breakdown was fucking hard. It was not an easy process. Within that same time span, quite literally the day after we broke up, we got evicted from our house, and I then had to try and find a house to live, and like all the process of moving and everything like that. And then by the time I really actually got to try and sit with and try and process the relationship properly and allow myself the room to grieve, process, move on, etc., it was about 8 weeks later, 8 to 12 weeks later, before I really started to be able to dive deeper into that relationship dynamic and navigate the parts of it that I didn't necessarily like, but then also identify in certain aspects of things that I did like. Because at the same time, yes, there was a lot of negative, but there was also a lot of positive. And I needed to navigate and decide, okay, well, for me in the future, what is it that I want? Where do I want to be? How do I want to be? What do I want to do? Etc. Etc. In terms of showing up as the perfect partner, future husband, or future children that I do want to have. Is, what type of father do I want to be? Is the person I am now somebody who would be a good father, good role model, good? And I had to sit there and say, no, I'm not. Then I'm not the person I want to be. I need to work on some things. So there was a lot of good, there was a lot of bad, there was a lot of indifferent, there was a lot of things that I was avoiding, a lot of patterns that were starting to emerge that had happened for years, from people pleasing, uh, avoidance, boundaries that weren't necessarily being adhered to, and within that, abandoning myself and things like that as well as something that had sort of shown up in a majority of my relationships in the past, which is to do with more or less attachment styles. Now, I'm not sure if anyone listening to this has even listened or done much or looked at much with relation to attachment styles, but essentially what we're talking about when we look at attachment styles is we're looking at anxious, we're looking at secure, and we're looking at avoidant. Now, there is some slight crossover in a couple of these, but predominantly those are the three categories. You've got anxious, avoidant, secure. Now, I was somebody who had identified as an anxious attachment style for probably quite some time. I was somebody who had a tendency to forego boundaries, values, etc., beliefs that I had set for the appeasement of others, because I was scared. I was worried they were going to leave me. I was worried I wasn't good enough. I was worried they would think or find someone better. I was so concerned in not being enough for them that I was abandoning myself, and then in turn was not enough for myself. I wasn't showing up as the person I needed to be for myself. I wasn't adhering to my boundaries, values, beliefs for myself. And this started to have a negative effect on the relationship. Now, there were certain aspects of the relationship where this was showing up, but instead of me looking internally, I would look to external things to blame. I would blame other people. I would blame my partner. I would blame all of these other things rather than looking internally and be like, okay, well, if this common theme keeps arising, like, what is it that is actually telling me? Because if there's one thing I've learned on this journey over the last 9 months, it is everything is essentially a projection from internal to external. Everything that we see, the way in which we perceive things, the way in which we see the world, all stems from an internal source. How we react, how we respond, reply, all of these things are an internal thing first before they're projected out onto the world. So our own insecurities, things we do or don't like about ourselves, all of this sort of stuff starts internal and gets projected external. Now, there is so much research and so many things that are being done on this topic that I'm not necessarily going to dive too deep into that. And to be completely honest, I definitely want to sit down and do an episode with somebody who's definitely well versed in this topic than I am, to discuss these themes and discuss these sort of things. I mentioned at the start, this is more of a bit of a reflective, introspective journey, and a little bit about the personal growth that has come from within that journey, from a male's point of view, from a masculine point of view. Now, with past partners, and in saying that, I've only realistically had 2 real relationships in my life. However, there has been a common theme amongst pretty much any sort of relationship I've had with any form of female, which has been anxious attachment. Now, I would anxiously attach myself to a person and try to do every single thing possible to ensure that they did not leave me, when in turn they would then eventually, for the most part, leave. And that was because I would, act out or become reactive or just become somebody that I didn't like become somebody I didn't want to be. Um, Desperate could be a word that could be fucking used. Like, it was almost as if, oh, this person, if this person leaves me, I'm never going to find anybody else. I'm never going to be loved. I'm never going to be this. I'm never going to be that. And it's just not the case. Like, it's just not the reality of the situation, because realistically speaking, like, fuck it, I'm a fucking catch. Like, I've got a lot of really positive attributes about me. I've got a lot of really good things about me. I've got a lot of really amazing attributes that I can bring to both a relationship and as a husband, as a partner, as a father, like all of these different things right now. It's just a matter of, I would essentially attach myself to a person, and then when they would leave, inevitably I would then fucking crumble. And it was like, this was the start of the journey when I was about 20, where I started to go down the path of going to a psychologist and dealing with mental health and depression, anxiety. Started the process of ADHD stuff and diagnoses and all of this sort of thing. And it was essentially, all this stuff was just showing up because I hadn't necessarily sat with or dealt with the things that were internal to me. I hadn't sat with and dealt with, okay, well, why do I feel like I'm not complete without this person? Why do I feel like I need this person's attention to feel validated? Or why do I feel like I need this person's love to feel validated, or whatever the case might be? And at the back end of this most previous relationship, this was when I really started to dive into these themes. Now, there was 2 books in particular that I have read that were fucking incredibly eye-opening on this topic. Now, one of them was How to Stop Breaking Your Own Heart. I cannot remember the author's name for the life of me. That is horrible. And Attached. I also cannot remember the author's name, but they're both great books that essentially dive into and discuss attachment styles. They discuss self-abandonment. They discuss showing up for yourself first is not being selfish. Not showing up for yourself is actually being selfish, because if you don't show up for yourself and you abandon yourself and you essentially dismiss your own beliefs, etc., then you're going to project that into the external world, and it's going to come out and have a negative consequence. And then all of a sudden you've put it to one external thing that's happened, when in actuality it had nothing to do with that external thing. It was actually something to do with an internal sort of for lack of a better word, flaw that you weren't understanding, you weren't allowing yourself space to see and identify and grow with and things like that. So it required me to actively sit, read, write, dive deep, sit with some really shitty things, like write down everything that I don't like about myself, write down everything I do like about myself, write down everything that has ever happened to me that can cause quote unquote trauma or just tendencies that would show up that needed addressing and needed to be identified, and diving into things like shadow work or inner child work or just all these sort of things that, like, I will be 100% honest, like, it's fucking uncomfortable. It is so uncomfortable to sit with some of this stuff, and it is incredibly uncomfortable to sit there and pick apart your internal flaws, but not from a negative space, from a really positive space, because you can sit there and identify and say, well, these are the things that I don't necessarily like, but I can improve and I can get better. Now, for me, the biggest key takeaway from my previous relationship was my reactions. And I would always say, and I still believe this to this day, that I am not an angry person. I just had a short temper, which is fucking, it's almost counter to the other, because yes, although I might not be angry, I would get angry very quickly. And it's like, okay, just because I can flick a switch and I go from angry to happy, it's like, cool, but I was still angry in that moment. You know, the biggest thing for me was road rage. I was a fucking serial road rage. I'd get so angry at people while driving, and then 2 seconds later, I'd be back singing a song, or I'd be like, whatever the case, or I'd be back in a conversation. I'd be like, oh, I'm not angry. I just, I get road rage. People suck at driving, blah, 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 which some people do suck at driving. Please drive better. Like, if you just shit at driving, just be better, please. Like, I ask for everybody and everybody's sanity in this world. But I was allowing something like that to change the way I felt internally. Even if it was for a split second, it was still happening. And I was like, I don't like that. I don't like that. And I was like, I can't fix the way I react to my partner. I can't fix the way I react to other people. I can't fix the way I react to certain situations if I'm not fixing every aspect where that is showing up. I can't try and fix it in one area, leave it in another, partially fix it in this area, and then just entirely dismiss it in this area, because that is not fixing it. That is essentially just putting a fucking band-aid over it, hoping it doesn't crack, which eventually it will. Now, I had also sat with and understood, like, okay, why was I getting and becoming the person I didn't like towards the end of the relationship? And I realized that there was quite a lot of boundaries that were being crossed, or boundaries, values, beliefs that I had that I was essentially dismissing to try and appease somebody else, to try and continue to be there for somebody else when I wasn't even being there for myself. And a really cool quote that I've heard post this is, your partner should never complete you, they should only ever compliment you. I'll say that again because I kind of stuttered. Your partner should never complete you, they should only compliment you. Now, the reason I say this is because this quote actually made me, like, really sit with it and kind of dive a bit deeper into, okay, well, what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean for somebody to compliment you, not complete you? Because we all hear the things about, like, oh, they complete me, or this completes me. It's like, no, no, no. You should be a whole person, and this person should come in and add to that. This person should add value, as you should for them. And this is a two-way street. Relationships are a two-way street. Now, to create a harmonious relationship as a two-way street, you need to have a harmonious relationship with yourself, and you need to be able to sit down and understand yourself in a really deep manner, and you need to be able to express that as well. It's not just enough to be able to identify these things. You need to be able to express that to the other person, because they will not know. They can't know. I was great. I'm great at talking. I'm great at communicating. I'm great at being very open throughout the entirety of the relationship. I would genuinely pride myself on my communication. However, there were still a lot of things that I would sit with internally that maybe I wasn't necessarily as happy with, but I was almost scared to express them because I was worried about her leaving or fear of abandonment, and that was starting to show up there. And I was like, oh, if I do this, then this is going to happen. And then, okay, well, I need to stop doing that. And it eventually just led to me abandoning myself to the point where it was only going to end poorly. And it did. It did at the end of the day. And that was something that, I had to sit with and try and process and work through and offer myself a really great amount of grace and love and compassion. And any of these themes that I would dive into, I had to sit there and look at it from the perspective of a friend giving me advice, or me giving advice to a friend. Like, you're never going to turn around and criticize a friend negatively. You're always going to try and come from a point of love, compassion, grace. You're going to try and offer positive solutions. You're not going to tear them to pieces. And that's what I had to do for myself, because boundaries and standards are they're acts of self-respect, they're acts of self-love, they're not selfishness. As I said, being selfish is to abandon yourself, because if you can't show up for yourself, you cannot show up for others. Being selfish is you abandoning your own beliefs. Being selfish is you abandoning your own values. Being selfish is you abandoning your own boundaries to try and appease another person. Now, not everybody is going to be your person, and that is perfectly okay. If you express these sort of things to your partner and they don't necessarily, their values, beliefs, boundaries, etc., don't align, then that's okay. You guys can go your separate way, and no harm, no foul. It's okay. It's going to be okay. There will be somebody out there who does. But if you can express this and have this conversation with this person, and then all of a sudden you can work on it, or you can start to work through these things together, then all of a sudden you've created a really, really positive environment for growth, for development, for strengthening your relationship. Because there's a lot of times where things can be worked through, and there's a lot of times where things can't be. And I think identifying both of those is crucial in any real relationship. Right now, all of this can stem back to an ability to emotionally regulate. Now, I mentioned it before, but like, you cannot show up not being the person you want to be in one avenue and then expect to just perfectly show up as the person you want to be in other avenues, right? You need to show up as the person you want to be across the board, because the person you're going to want to be across the board is going to be your authentic self. They're going to be the person who is the best version of you. And that is somebody you're proud of, somebody you're proud to be, somebody you would want to be friends with. Now, emotional regulation is crucial as a coach. Being able to regulate your emotions as a coach, and somebody who's not in the public eye, but like somebody who shows up online, or somebody who shows up in the real world and doing things and stuff like that. So it's crucial that you start to do it across all avenues of your life. And I had to sit with and identify all these things in one area, and then carry it over to this area, and then carry it over to this area. And it's like, okay, well, the best part about it is, once I started to get better at setting boundaries, I could do that across all aspects of my life. And then all of a sudden I started to feel a little bit more joy. Once I sat down and wrote out, what are my true values in life? Where do I see the value in life? Where do I see the values within my relationships? Where do I see the values in my business, etc.? And started to show up more authentically to those, my business took off. I started to do a lot better. I started to have clients coming into me. It was almost as if I'd found a point of alignment, where the clients who were coming into me were clients that I really wanted to be working with, and I was taking a really great amount of pride in working with. And it all stemmed from me being able to show up better for myself in one aspect, and then all of these things started to happen. A little bit of a cascade effect, flow on of positivity that was just fucking impactful in so many avenues of my life, that it was fucking amazing. Now, it's a hard topic to discuss, and I said at the start, especially as a male strength coach, because it's not a topic that's discussed every day. And I can guarantee you right now, there are probably some people who will entirely dismiss this episode and won't listen to it. And unfortunately, they're probably the people who should listen to it the most. There will be a lot of men, women, whatever, who will scoff and go, fuck, emotions are for pussies. This is this, this is that. And it's like, well, actually, you're probably somebody who could benefit from this a little bit more. Because at the end of the day, Emotional awareness is not weakness. It's actually fucking powerful. It offers clarity. It offers strength, like true internal strength. When you can show up as the person you want to be and somebody you were proud to be every single day, that is a fucking strength. When you can be there to help others to the best of your ability because you are helping yourself to the best of your ability, that is a fucking strength. That is a superpower. It is something that we need more of. Now, I think it's something that gets a bit lost in conversations, and I know that there needs to be probably a bit more of a better depth on it. Again, I'm not an expert in this field. I am not somebody who studies this field. I am somebody who's just read a couple of books, listened to some podcasts, some YouTube episodes. I can only talk from personal experience about the things that I've done myself to be able to go through this journey and essentially decide, okay, well, who do I want to be? How do I become that person? What needs to change? What stays the same? It was as simple as that. It could be a 4 thing in a journal. What don't I like? What do I like? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? Done. You write those 4 things down. All of a sudden, you have a really good framework for how you can live the rest of your life, how you can show up in your business, how you can show up in your relationships, how you can show up at work, how you can show up as a friend, as a family member, whatever the case might be. Because I can promise you right now that emotional awareness, emotional regulation, all of these things is masculine. This is not being reactive, being grounded, being comfortable within your own skin, feeling more confident, feeling powerful is being masculine. And I think that the terminology behind that can get a little bit lost because we can see it as different things from different generations. The previous generation was probably a little bit of like, boys don't cry, suck it up, rub some dirt in it, eat a fucking thing of concrete, toughen up, princess, all of this sort of shit. And we've seen suicide rates of males skyrocket through the fucking roof because males have been told that we're not allowed to cry, we're not allowed to show emotion, we're not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do that. We have to be one thing and one thing only, and we can't have any form of emotional regulate. We can't have any form of emotions. We can't show any of that side of ourselves. And then all of a sudden, the only solution left is to kill ourselves. And I know because I've been there. At 18 years old, when I attempted suicide, I can tell you right now that everything running through my head was boys don't cry, boys don't show emotions. And to be completely honest, I actually grew up in an incredibly, incredibly positive family environment where I was encouraged by the males around me. I had seen males around me, my father, my stepfather, I had seen them show emotion. I had seen them cry. I had seen them, they had not necessarily encouraged me, but they had supported me when those things were happening, not rub dirt in it, not grow the fuck up, not deal with it, blah, blah, blah. I was very, very, very lucky in that sense. I was very lucky that I was able to experience that. And for me, it was something that I needed to just be able to understand better. And in that, it was helping others around me as well. You know, it was having conversations with mates, males, and telling them, hey, it's okay to show emotion. It's actually great. You not showing emotion is going to have you showing up as a person you don't want to be. You trying to suppress how you feel is going to have you showing up in ways you don't want to be, or it's going to lead to other more serious aspects like anxiety, depression, self confidence issues, all of these different things. You're going to become a person you don't want to be, and it all stems from an internal environment being projected externally. It's not easy, it's not simple. Dependent upon the individual, who you are, and how you've dealt with things in the past, it might be something that's really, really, really fucking hard. I'm very fortunate in the fact that I have probably classified as somebody who's quite emotional my entire life, and I have been very in tune with my emotions, and I understand and know how I feel. I've been able to articulate the way in which I feel for a very long time, and I can express that. But I'd never gone to the next phase of actually being able to actively work on it. And that is why I believe that although no relationship breakdown is easy, no breakup or anything like that is fucking easy, it sucks, it hurts, you start to build a life with a person, you start to plan things with a person, then all of a sudden that changes, and you don't just lose that person, you lose your identity and the person that you would become with that person. You lose the planned future for yourself as well. And I think that that's really, really fucking hard, because everybody will just tie a relationship breakdown to, oh, I've lost this person. It's like, you haven't just lost that person, you've also lost the version of yourself that you were with that person. So coming to the back end of a relationship, or if you've had a breakup or anything like that, being able to sit with and identify these things and work on them, not for anybody else. Like, you shouldn't work on yourself for another person. You should want to work on yourself for yourself. If it happens to be that by you doing the work on yourself, that is then going to allow you to show up better for this other person or in future relationships or whatever the case might be, then that is only ever going to fucking benefit you and them. It's only ever going to benefit your business. It's only going to ever benefit your job, your friendships, all of this sort of stuff is going to stem from just doing the work internally. And I wish it was something that I'd done earlier. I truly do. I wish it was something that I'd done younger. But unfortunately, as a male, we just don't fucking do that sort of stuff as much as we probably should. And I'm someone who has done a lot more probably personal work and personal development and all these things than some other males. But still, there was a lot of things that I was avoiding. And I know multiple times throughout the course of the relationship, I had said, I don't need to go back to therapy. I don't need this. I've done the work. I've done X. I've done Y. And it's like, no. I probably needed to go back to therapy. I've gone back to therapy since then. And not at a point now where I'm struggling, but because I'm doing really fucking well. And I want to continue to work on these things. I want to continue to show up better as the person I want to become. There's now other things that are starting to become exposed that I'm like, okay, cool. So because I've done this work, I'm now able to identify this. Well, I actually want to fix that maybe a little bit more, or I really want to dive deeper on that or work on that. So I've now gone back and started seeing a psychologist, and she's fucking great. Like, I'm only been to a couple of sessions now, and within the first session, I rolled in, and I'd gone to therapy so many times, and I was still anxious. I was still nervous. I was still worried. I was still all these things. And I genuinely left the session feeling so much lighter. It was as if a weight had been lifted off of my shoulders, and it had shown me the power of vulnerability, but it had also shown me the power of being self-reflective, and it had also shown me the power of identifying things you want to fix or be better at or work with or whatever, and working on them. Because as I said, it's not to show up for others better, it's to show up for yourself better, which as a byproduct, you are going to show up for others better. The very common saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's very fucking relevant. It's very true. Whether you're a male, whether you're a female, whatever the case might be, I've said it multiple times throughout this. Looking after yourself first is not selfish. Abandoning yourself is selfish. Disregarding your values, your beliefs, your morals, that is selfish. That is going to have you turn up as a person you don't want to be, when you could very easily turn up as the best possible version of yourself. You just need to sit with it a little bit longer and understand it a little bit more. So within that, right, it's not about perfection. It's not about being the perfect person, because nobody's fucking perfect. There's always going to be things that you can work on and get better at and do more of or do less of, or whatever the case might be. It's strong relationships with yourself, with other people, etc. They require personal responsibility. That's first and foremost. You need to be personally responsible for yourself. Remember that pretty much everything that you are projecting externally is coming from an internal place. I found that through doing a lot of this work, that I was someone who was very self-conscious, because I was worried about other people judging me. Every time I'd go outside of the house, I'd worry about being judged or people's thoughts on me or whatever the case might be. And I realized that stemmed from a place of me probably being more judgmental of others than I should be. Me judging others first and being like, well, I'm going to judge them because they're probably judging me, when in actuality, I'm just judging them because I'm projecting onto them that they're going to be judging me because I'm judging them. Now wrap your head around that, because it takes a couple of times to really fucking work out how that comes about. But a lot of things that people are insecure with within themselves, they then project onto the outside world. That outside projection, they then take back again internally. And it's like this weird, never ending feedback loop of judgment, criticism, confidence, like all, and not even just with relation to those topics, but just similar things like that. So it's something that is going to probably be an ongoing journey for the remainder of my life. It is something that I'm probably going to need to continue to work on forever. And I don't see that as a bad thing, because there's always going to be better things to show up for. There's always going to be better things to show up as. And as these things start to cascade and become more positive, it has a flow on effect on every other aspect of my life. It's just going to get better and better. I'm going to be able to show up as the business owner I want to be. I'm going to be able to show up in the world as I want to be. I'm going to be able to show up as the best husband that I want to be. I'm going to be able to show up as the best father that I want to be for my future children, because I owe it to them to be the best version of me. And if I don't do the internal work, if I don't sit with the stuff that's uncomfortable, that's gross, that you just don't like, or you love, even, like, you can love aspects of yourself and still work on them. You can love certain things about yourself, certain qualities, or whatever the case might be, and still work on them. You can make them stronger, you can make them better, you can make them bigger. They're not necessarily isolated to, okay, well, this is good, so I don't need to work on that ever again. It's like, okay, well, cool, this is good, but let's make it great. Let's make it fucking fantastic. Let's make it the best it can possibly be. So I think if there's a takeaway, and this is not going to be a very long episode, I'm probably going to wrap it up pretty quickly, but if there's something that I can encourage every single person who has listened this far to do, it is reflect on your own journey, reflect on your own past relationships, or even reflect on your current relationships. Is there things within these that have shown up that you may not have necessarily loved about yourself, or not necessarily liked? I guarantee there is. Nobody's perfect. I can promise you right now that there is probably things that are showing up in relationships that you have. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a person, or it doesn't need to be your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife or your husband, but whatever the case might be. It can be a family member, it can be friends, it can be employees, it can be work, it can be co-workers, whatever the case might be. I can promise you right now that there's probably parts of your life that you can show up better as a person. And by sitting down and having a little bit of reflection upon these things, you will probably find that once you start to do just even a little bit of this work, now I promise you, it doesn't even need to be a lot to start to see a really positive flow and effect. And there's probably going to be a work in progress. You're probably going to go up and down and up and down. It's not linear. You're not just going to be like, oh, I've identified it, and now it's fucking trajectories through the roof. It's probably going to be up. It's probably going to be down. There's times where I still find myself becoming reactive or angry or projecting things out into the external world. And the best part about it is now that instead of doing that and not sitting with it or identifying it, I can do that, identify it, and actually try and work through it. Okay, what has this shown me? What has this brought up? What has this situation or environment brought up from my past? Or what has this brought up that I want to work on, things like that? So I mentioned it before that this is just going to be a personal introspective journey. If you have listened to this episode up until now, thank you very much. If any of it resonates with you, if you have any questions, I'm a very open book. I love talking about this sort of stuff if it means it's going to help others. If you have questions, if you're on your own journey of self-discovery, if you want help with books or a fucking podcast to listen to besides this one, because this one could be pretty good, reach out, send me a message, please. Honestly, I mean it. I truthfully mean it. If you want to have a discussion, let me know. If you don't, and you took some value from this podcast and you want to share it with a friend, please feel free to do so. This is going to be grown fairly organically, and the more people that I can get in to listen to it, the more I'm going to be able to help others long term. And as I said, I do want to do a future episode with somebody who is an expert in this field, so they can offer more, they can offer better insights, and they can offer better information, so that you don't just have a little introspective journey, but you have some more actionable steps you can take. And in terms of actionable steps you can take, quite honestly, you can just sit down, list out things you love about yourself, things you don't necessarily like about yourself, whether that's in relationships or just in general. And remember to not take this from a negative space, take it from a place of grace, compassion, love for yourself. How do you want to show up in the world, and who do you want to be in the future? You can write those 4 things down and you can put it away in a book and never look at it again. But I promise you that once you do that, you'll want to dive a bit deeper. I can promise you that once you do that, you're going to want to get a little bit more information. You're going to want to find out some more stuff. So, as I said, if it does hit home, if it resonates, send me a message, share the episode. I'd love to hear from you. Beyond that, I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day. Have an even better week, and I'll speak to you next time.